busy. My name is Miss Lizzie. I don't ever smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some ditties. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys, Miss Liz in the house, and I have an incredible guest in the house. We're going to talk about food, identity, reinvention, experience. We're going to talk about it all today on Tea Time. We have the incredible Mariko in the house coming in, and she has Mariko Presents, and we're going to talk about some cooking classes, all that good stuff. But before we get started, you guys know how Miss Liz rolls. Get over to all those platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitch, all those good platforms. Give those like, follow, and subscribing, and get these tea times out there because they do make a difference for the guests and for people who resonate with the stories that come to the table. Also, check out the podcast apps, Podbean, Listen Notes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and the ones that I haven't mentioned, Miss Liz is on all of those as well. Give those a like, follow, subscribe, and share these tea times. And if a tea time resonates with you or somebody that you know it will resonate with, give it a good share because that's how we do make a difference with tea. Now let's get over to babyboomers.org because Miss Liz is partnered with them as well. And if you're not looking for what Miss Liz offers or serves, because I'm not everyone's cup of tea, you can check out 50 other podcast shows that are on there, and you can get yourself featured on those shows as well. So Miss Liz likes to support everybody. Support for support. That's how we work in this house. Let's get over to the disclaimer and then a beautiful intro, and then we're going to get Mariko in here. We're going to spill her tea, and she's not serving me a tea today. She's serving me an IRE. That is what we are doing. We're switching it up, guys. So her tea is identity, reinvention, and experience. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicating to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guests, viewers, and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of the discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or check out my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect your wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, welcome to Tea Time with Miss Liz, where conversations remind us that the most powerful journeys are often the ones that transform not only where we live, but how we see ourselves and the world around us. Today's guest brings us a beautiful fusion of culture, storytelling, food, travel, and intentional human connection to the Tea Time table. Please join me in welcoming Mariko Presents, founder of Mariko Presents, global experience curated culinary host, strategist, and storytelling whose work explores the intersection of identity, reinvention, and human experience. Originally from California and now based in Prague, After years living and working throughout Vietnam, India, Southeast Asia, and Europe, Mariko has built a life dedicated to meaningful connection through food, culture, travel, and shared experiences. Her work centers on creating intentional spaces where people can gather, connect, reflect, and better understand both themselves and one another through storytelling and culture exploration. Her IRE is Identity, Reinvention, and Experience. Today's Tea Time will explore reinvention through global living, food and storytelling as human connection, culture, identity, and belonging, intentional experiences, and hospitality, how travel transforms perspective and purpose. Mariko reminds us that some of life's greatest lessons are discovered when we are willing to step beyond familiarity and remain open to human connection. So grab your cup and join us for a meaningful and inspiring conversation filled with perspective, culture, and real life tea, truth, experience, and awareness. And let me get her in here and let's spill some tea. Welcome, Mariko.
Hi. Cheers. I've got my tea and I'm waiting for you. How are you doing?
I am doing good, and yourself?
I'm well. It's evening. I'm here in Prague, Czech Republic, and I am excited to be here with you this evening.
I am so happy to have you here. And I pronounced it wrong, so please excuse me for saying that wrong. You're in Prague. I always pronounce the letters over the words. Like, I'm just like, oh my goodness, what am I doing?
Here it's either Prague or Praha is the, more traditional way. So close enough.
Well, Mariko, tell us a little bit about how your life started as a little girl and who you are now as a grown woman.
Oh, we're just going to dive right in there.
We're going to go deep. We're going to get right in there.
Yeah. Okay. So I grew up in Central California in the US, and I was raised by my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother lived with us, and her family had Italian roots. And so ever since I was a little girl, food was one of the bases of our lives. Every holiday, every gathering, it was everyone meeting in the kitchen and spending days, weeks planning the menus, planning the food, grocery shopping at 20 different grocery stores. So all of the moments of my childhood was based around food and the table and everyone just coming together. And one of the funny things, growing up, I was never allowed to cook. Like, they would not let me in the kitchen to do prep, to do anything. So it was like,
so this is your payback.
Yeah. So you got to understand, Italian grandmother is just like, I don't trust you to do it yourself. Like, I'm the expert. So I watched. And I knew a lot about Italian food, but as a young child, I was very studious. And we had encyclopedia sets, and I was always interested in learning more about different, cuisines and different regions. And I remember going to the public library and checking out a book on Thai cuisine. I did not know anything about Thai cuisine. And there was an Asian grocery store by our house. And it was one of those grocery stores we would never go into because it's, it was just not that, familiarity. And so one time, my mom, she was always, very supportive of all the crazy things I wanted to do in my entire life. And so she took me to to this Asian grocery store, and I was able to see all the ingredients that were in my cookbooks and actually see them in real life. So I still wasn't allowed to buy them. I wasn't allowed to do anything with them. But as soon as I got out of the house, started going to university, when I first went away to university, it was, I wanted to study medicine. I was like, I'm gonna go into medicine. I think my major was forensic anthropology. But I didn't care about school. I was just more interested in going to the local grocery stores and trying to cook in my dorm room and, try all these things that I never had the opportunity to make when I was living at home. And that's just kind of how my journey started. Ever since a young age, I always felt that there was so much that we could learn about the world around us, about other people based on the foods that they ate. And not just the foods, but the moments around the foods. So, over time, years passed, but that actually brings me to what I do here today.
See, and look at revenge time, right? It's like, you don't let me in the kitchen. I'm going to be in the kitchen when I get to be a big girl.
Exactly.
There's so much food out there and so many different cultures and heritages out there that you can learn from it, right? It's kind of like an experience of flavor and touch and senses. When you're having these cuisine connections and moments that you do the classes and that, Mariko, do you let them smell and touch and explain like the experience of the food?
Absolutely. So a little bit about what I'm doing now. Let me just, kind of go into that, and then I can go back to your question. So I'm here in Prague and I host culinary experiences. So people who are traveling from all around the world, they want something different than a restaurant. They end up booking a seat at my table. So it's usually just like a private dinner for two, a private party, and they just want something different. And the menu changes. There's similarities, but it kind of changes based on what's in season, what's in fresh, the guest preferences. But each item on the menu tells some story about, me, my life, and it has it incorporates all those different elements. So for example, I'm a California girl, but then I moved from California to Vietnam. When I was living in Vietnam, I met a really handsome guy from India. I moved to India, and now we're in Prague. Okay, so for example, one of the, my most popular dishes that I make is a risotto. And it's a recipe that my grandma taught me. I mean, she didn't teach me. She let me watch her make it 1,000 times. So,
Because you weren't allowed in the kitchen to cook it.
But with that, I end up using like saffron that I bring back from India. So whenever I travel to India, I get this special, saffron. So there's many varieties of saffron, but this one is distinctly Indian, has a little bit like more like Indian characteristics. So it gives the risotto a different flavor. And then I use, different accoutrements, like different, seasonings to go with it based on what's in season in, Czech Republic at the time. So during the fall, it could be local mushrooms because those are very popular here. During the summer, like spring, summer, right now, I do a lot of kind of like nettles pesto or gremolata with the carrot tops. You know how like carrots have like the green tops of it? You can make a pesto out of that. So each one of the dishes that I make, and I'm just using the risotto as the example, that one dish has so many different characteristics of, of my journey. And it was never intentional, but it happened organically. So
we have some comments that are coming in. We have some questions as well for you that I'd like to get out to you. We have a comment here. Mariko has designed over 600 experiences worldwide. That's truly impressive. And we have a question here from Profit Power. What inspired today's theme of meaningful moments across cultures? For me, I love food, and I love to understand the cultures and traditions that come with the food, because there's so much that, you can make it poutine in Canada, and you can make it poutine in Italy. Like there's different ways of making it. So for me, it was food. What is it for you, Mariko?
For me, it's the fact that you have to think about like what happens when you're having a meal. Your brain relaxes. There's like this psychology that you're focused on other things, right? And I think that regardless of who you are, where in the world you are, there's always this fundamental part of like meals. Okay. And just an example. So I host these different experiences. And a couple months ago, I had this experience, and it was a bunch of guests from all over the place. So sometimes they can book a seat at my table. Sometimes it's private, but sometimes you're sitting with a bunch of strangers. And one of the interesting things about that was they were all from the US, and they all had backgrounds of people that they would never normally hang out with in their life. Maybe they would actually have been like prejudiced against, or, different things like that. So you've got a table of 8 people that would never in a million years like sit across the table from each other. And they were sharing stories, they were sharing pictures of their kids and their partners. And I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. But at the end of that meal, everyone, they said it during the meal, they wrote me privately. They were like, I learned so much over that meal, and I met people that I would have never talked to at all. And they actually stay in contact. They're all like, Facebook friends, Instagram followers, all of that stuff. But the fact that it's just, we have so much, prejudice and all these other things in the world that are trying to separate everyone and show the divides. But when you're sitting around a table having a shared meal with each other, you realize that we're all actually pretty much the same. So, I think, that was like a really good question. But for me, I think it's really just, it's a way to kind of, even out the table. Does that make sense? But it's just,
I like it because
for me,
the food is bringing the connection, but it's also breaking the barriers and bringing different perspectives to the table. Like you said, they wouldn't have sat with each other. And that's what happened when I was doing my tea parties as well, was people came to me and said, you know what, I would have never sat with that person before. But thank you for having this party, because now I know this person and we've become friends. We've gotten to understand each other. And I think that's what we need that connection, right? And I love that food brings that connection, because food is good to eat, guys. And and there's so much flavor out there that we do not even know, because we're so stuck in our comfort zone, right? Pasta, or potatoes and steak, potato and meat kind of person, or stews and soups, and open the mind, the avenue of the mind. And that's what I really loved. Like when you reached out to me, I was like, oh my goodness, can we talk about different kind of foods and spices that I might not even know about that I want to try? Like if you have a sensitive stomach to spices, what spices should you avoid? And what spices could you try that your tummy could handle?
Okay, so that's a very good question. And I want to just, I just want to talk about spices for a second, because there's spices. Traditionally, when we think of spice, we think of hot, like, oh my God, this is so hot. It's going to ruin my stomach. It's going to, I'm not going to be able to taste anything afterwards. Okay. But then there's also the spices that have all the flavors. So for example, I lived in India, so I do a lot of Indian cooking. And when people think Indian food, they think, oh, that is very hot. Okay. That's hot. But there's all these other spice blends. So you think about a traditional Indian dish. It could have cinnamon, it could have nutmeg, it could have garam masala, it could have like cumin. It has, one dish could have 50 different spices that doesn't even have any heat to it. And it's what kind of brings it all together. So, so for me, that's a really good question. Like a lot of the spices that I use on a daily basis, besides like the Indian ones I was talking about, a lot of like cumin, like in India, it's jeera, cumin. And the reason I use that is because that is also common in a lot of different cuisines. So if you have like a Mexican cuisine, you have Indian cuisines, you have some Middle Eastern cuisines, even some European cuisines, some French curries, actually, like mild, curries or cheeses actually have that in there. So that's kind of, another one of those, spices that is not actually hot, that I use a lot, and is across like, so many different things. And if you've never, for the audience out there, if you've never had like cumin or jeera, one of a little common summer beverages in India is you get some sparkly water, squeeze some lime in there, and then put a little bit of jeera powder, put a little bit of maybe honey, and that's going to be like really refreshing. And if you have any like stomach issues or just you ate like a heavy meal, you drink that and it just makes you feel better. So if you see it in the stores and you've never known what to do with it, try adding it to a little soda water with some lime and tell me what you think.
I really like, because when people think of spices, they think spicy, right? They think hot. So
Yeah.
I'm so glad we got to talk about the spices, because there's so many different spices out there in the world that when you look at the spice rack, right, you're like, what can I do with this? What can I do with that? And I'm kind of that person I'll put a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then we'll see how it turns out. And then if it doesn't turn out, it's never do that again.
Absolutely.
But that's how I like to experience with food, right? Is put a little bit of this, put a little bit of that. And I love colorful dishes. Do you play with a lot of colors when you're making dishes?
Absolutely. Because first off, we eat with our eyes. So there's the psychology. If the food is beautiful, then it's going to taste better. And you think about like in nature when we're eating fresh vegetables and let me just I'm going to the side real quick. Like, look at these tomatoes I just got at the farmer's market. Like, and they're like the sweetest tomatoes I've ever seen. And when you're going through the market and you're just, you see all these red tomatoes and you see these, it's like, of course you have to buy them. And whenever I put them on anything now, it just tastes better because it looks better. And then, and I know sometimes it's not accessible for everyone to be able to go to, farmers markets and different stores and get these, fun orange tomatoes. But some of the things that I always do in a quick to kind of just like brighten up the dish is always just add some little like fresh herbs. Like a lot of grocery stores will have like a little like inexpensive basil plant or something like that you can buy. They don't last long, but it's enough to like, snip some leaves and put it on your food. Or I always have pickled onions in the refrigerator. And basically that's just some red onions, some, vinegar and water in a little jar, put it in the refrigerator. And then you can put those on any salad, your eggs, any dish. And then it just gives it this bright pop of pink, so even, so I try to make everything, bright and fun as possible. But then when, there's not a lot of time or, things aren't available, there's, just a few little, tweaks to, to brighten it up.
Well, we have a question here from Bargain Homes, and it is, what was the first culture experience that made Mariko see the world differently?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think it was,
we got her thinking, guys. We got her thinking.
Okay. I have a couple, but I probably think the first one is when I first moved to Los Angeles. And again, I was, in food. I actually went to school for marketing. So it took me a while of being in Los Angeles to get into food, actually. But now I had like the world at my fingertips. And a friend had told me about this Korean grocery store in K-Town. And was like, you need to get there. They open at 10. You need to be there at 4:00 in the morning. And I was like, why do I need to be there at 4:00 in the morning? It's like lining up for a Taylor Swift concert or something. And it's because the one day of the week, that's when they get their tuna. And I was like, okay. And so it was basically like, I get to this grocery store. I got there like 6 in the morning. And then there's like lines of hundreds of people waiting for their tuna. And, these tunas are huge. So everyone was going to get some tuna. But the thing that really was interesting to me, that you got to remember, everyone is there in line almost competing for the same thing. That is why you're getting there so early. But there were people with thermoses of coffee, bringing snacks, sharing with everyone in the line. And I had never seen that before. Like you're all like fighting for the same thing, but people are there and bringing food and, drinks, and hey, I'll stay in line for you while you go to the washroom at the Starbucks or whatever. And I had never seen community like that before in my life, until I was, like 6 a.m. at a grocery store in Koreatown waiting for some tuna.
I was going to say 4 a.m. Is that when the tuna bites?
Yeah, well, that's the time when the fish market opens. So I learned that they go to the fish market, then they have to bring the fish, and yeah.
Well, we have a question here from Antonio for how did living in Vietnam and India influence your perspective on belonging?
Oh, these are such good questions today.
I know, right? I got the best listeners out there.
I think living in Vietnam and India really kind of influenced my perspective on belonging, because I realized that I had to integrate with the cultures more. Just a side note, like I live in, Prague, Czech Republic, and a lot of times people move here and they only hang out with expats, other foreigners. And so that is their whole entire circle. They're not integrating, with everyone else here. But in Vietnam and India, I realized that the only way that I could make it was just kind of like fully embracing, like, okay, like, this is not easy. Both of those places were very difficult to live, but they weren't actually that difficult, because I was able to learn, the different cultural ways of doing things that I would do in the US, they don't fly there, and vice versa. So, just for example, like I remember people at a grocery store in Los Angeles having meltdowns if someone was taking too long to write a check at the grocery store. In Vietnam, they'll be like, oh, I'll run back and go get something else. And then you're waiting in line for half an hour while they come back with like a thing of groceries. And at first I was just like, who does this? Like this, like, I'm starting to get irate. But then one of my friends was just like, nope, that's the way it is. And once you just learn to accept that, the way things are here are different, then, you're really going to you'll start to belong and like start to understand. And once I embraced all that, it was a lot easier.
Well, it's hard to embrace a different culture, right? When we're raised a certain way. And then when we go to a different country, our beliefs and values are different than what are in different countries, right? So it takes time for us to feel belonged and accepted in communities. We have a question here from Francis, and it is, how do you ensure each experience still feels personal and meaningful?
God, these are fantastic questions today. And that's a really, good one. And I think for my culinary experiences, yes, people want to come, they want to try my food, they want to learn about me, but it's also really understanding them. Why are they here? Why are they on their journey? And just trying to, when they're at my table, it's not about me. They book the experience for me, but it's really just trying to, get them to have the memorable experience about it. So just kind of understanding, like, okay, like, why did you book? Why are you in Prague out of all the places in Europe? Why aren't you in a Paris or someplace else? And then once you start to ask questions about them, about their life, their history, what they're doing, then they start to just feel relaxed and they're happy. And then, one of the comments I always get is they're like, this is like being at a friend's house. This is like being with like my family members. Like, you don't feel like you're at a restaurant. You just feel you're just comfortable. I've had experiences of, families that don't really get along coming for a birthday dinner, but then at the end, everyone's just like sharing some of their favorite stories and maybe working through some of the issues that they might have had. It's just, and I think it's, how do I want to put it? I think especially now with, I'm trying to come up with my words carefully, so please bear with me. But everyone's all about like, we're all surrounded by so much social media, and it's everyone just shouting all the time, like, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. And a lot of people, they are not the types of people that are just going to shout to the world everything that they're doing, but they all want to be heard. They all have stories that they, that are close to them. They all have things that they need to talk about. I had one guest, and it was a solo person, and we just chatted for 6 hours about his, ex-wife and impending divorce and, different things like that. But it was like, hey, I've never actually been able to talk with anyone about these, with these topics. So I think, just regardless of who we are, where we are in their world, if you give people the opportunity to open up, you're going to be able to connect with them on a deeper level than anyone else can.
Absolutely. And Mariko, do you get like a lot of solo travelers for your events?
Yeah, a good amount, actually.
I've noticed that there's an increase in solo travelers after COVID. A lot of people are just like, I just want to take a trip. Like, life's too short. Let's just go, and sometimes you have a partner that doesn't want to travel, doesn't want to take a trip. So you're like, you know what, just pack the bags and go and take a trip.
Yeah. And, and I think one of the beauties of, the internet and all the resources that we have available to us right now, it's easy, it's safe, you don't have to be like, when I first started traveling, it was still a little, sketchy in some ways. I always traveled with a friend, but, and if you look at just travel industry trends, like there's a thing called travel divorce, where couples will go, they'll go to the airport together, and then maybe the woman will go on like a health resort holiday where she's fully pampered, and then the guy will go, hike some crazy mountains. And it's, sometimes we all want to have different experiences, so that's part of it. And we also can't live our lives doing things that we don't want to do for someone else. And the other part of it is life is too short. So if you want to go somewhere and you have the time off and the resources, you should just do it. And you don't have to ask for permission or get someone to go along. And I think one of the, fun things about some of my experiences and just the people I meet on the way, right? It's just like, hey, I had a week off from work. I've always wanted to go here. Flights are inexpensive, and here I am, and it just gives you that freedom to really be able to do what you want to do.
Absolutely. Well, we have a comment here from Paula, and it is, Mariko's journey across multiple countries shows so much courage and curiosity. There's something beautiful about allowing ourselves to evolve through different places and people. We have a question here from Brandon Vincent. Producing over 3,000 video sequence globally is amazing achievement. What was one of the most memorable projects you've worked on? I don't know if that one's for Miss Liz or if that one is for Mariko, but for me, it's meeting all the different walks of life out there and sitting with people I would have never had the chance to sit with, having these tea times. Like today we're in Prague, and last week we were in Switzerland and Sweden, and there's so many different places that I've traveled in this little chair and in my rocking chair that is now retired. But for you, Mariko, what is one amazing achievement and memorable projects that you've worked on besides the cooking events that you've done?
Okay, so I like to think that, a lot of them are like, the best achievements. If we are talking specifically about video segments, okay, because, back in the day, I used to film like thousands of, cooking videos. But there was one video segment that never got aired. And I don't think I've ever talked about this on a show. So I will just talk about that segment because it was one of those situations where you put your mind to something, you have to do it because you don't have any other options. Okay. So I was in Los Angeles and I had one of the biggest reality TV shows of the time come to me and say, hey, we need to film an episode for this, reality star's birthday. And none of the restaurants in town will let us film. Are we able to film at your house and you can make this, fancy dinner? And I'm like, okay, sure. Yes. And they're like, it's tomorrow night. And I'm like, okay, that's a very short
notice.
Yeah. But then the real kicker was, we want you to disguise food that they would have never eaten, or they have no idea what it is. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, we want to surprise them with some iguana and some weird different meats. And I'm okay. So let me start Googling where to find meats. And I found this website in Southern California. And it was one of those websites that was designed probably in 2000. It was a really bad website, but they had zebra meat, iguana meat, kangaroo, all these different things. And on the website, it says, everything's like humane, raised, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay. So I call them up. I'm like, hey, I need this tomorrow. Is there any way? And they're like, yeah, come drive 30 miles south, meet us in the parking lot of this grocery store, which was a neighborhood I would never normally go to. And I will, I'll be parked in the parking lot in the gold Mercedes, bring cash. I'm like, okay. So I get there and this car rolls up and it's a Ford Taurus with spray painted gold and a Mercedes. It wasn't a real Mercedes. It was a fake Mercedes. So this guy comes out and he's like gangster. He's like, hey. And I'm like, hey. He's like, you got the goods? And I'm like, or he's like, you got the cash? I'm like, you got the goods? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, okay, and hands me this cooler chest. I'm like, what am I getting? And I gave him this huge stack of cash, which was my whole budget for, doing this thing. And he's like, don't open it up until I'm gone. I'm like, okay. So then he leaves and then I open it up and it was all perfectly sealed and, all that stuff. And apparently it's this company and they raise animals specifically for, for doing, different ethnic, dishes. A lot of royalty coming to Los Angeles. They would source meats for that. But anyway, so I ended up cooking the meal. I made a truffle mac and cheese with turtle. I made some porcini crusted kangaroo, some, different things like that. And it was one of the most fun experiences. It was difficult because I had to get a house camera ready. I had to get the food, this whole entire thing. The cast of the show absolutely loved it. They had such a fun time. But then it did not get aired because the producer said that people would get upset.
Animal rights activists.
Yeah, so that was kind of a bummer. But it was so much fun. So I guess, as far as, and I've done, so many huge events for big celebrities and all that. But I think that event was one of those, someone comes to you with a wild idea. You don't have a lot of time and you're just having to try to, figure it out and, fake it as you make it as you go.
You did a food deal, right? You didn't do a drug deal. You did a food deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is what I mean, guys. We have all sorts of things on Tea Time. So you got to tune in. You got to check these Tea Times out because you just never know what's coming to the table, guys. We have a question here from Rochelle. How can people create deeper connections when they feel like outsiders in a new place?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for, myself is one of the hardest things I've had to do is just put myself out there. Especially when you're in a new place, you got to think that you're starting from scratch. So for me, it was just, being a foreigner in some of these countries, there's different, Facebook groups. So a lot of my friends have been people that I have made on Facebook groups. And my husband always jokes like another stranger that you met on the internet that's, that we're going to go meet and stuff like that. Right. But it's always hard to just go out and meet new people and stuff like that. But everyone else also feels the same way. So I think, for myself, it's just kind of that, okay, this is going to be a little bit awkward. Like, who are these people? But just, just trying to like go out there and make friends. So that's part of it. I've used the internet for some of that. And then also parts of it is, the things that I love to do personally. If I go to those places where those things will happen, I will meet my tribe. So for example, I love tennis. I'm a big tennis player. Not big tennis player, but I like to socially play tennis. And when I lived in Los Angeles and I had just moved there and I didn't have any friends, I put a sign, like one of those little like printout signs that you can tear a phone number off of, and was like, hey, I want to play tennis. These are the times that I can play. Call me if you want to play tennis. And then I just had people calling me to play tennis. And some of those people became some of my closest friends. And none of them were creepy or anything like that. You're meeting in a public place at a tennis court, but it was just like, okay, this is what interests me. Let me find people who share some of the same interests. But I think the one thing I want to add is like, it's always a little uncomfortable.
Right? You got to get out of the comfort zone in order to get comfort. You got to
Exactly.
jump if you want to try, and you got to just be willing to get out of that, that stone, like that shut door. Just open the door and open the mind. Closed
Exactly.
mind doesn't get you anywhere. You have to open the mind. It's like when you're trying food, right? Have an open mind to it. We have a question here from Layla. How do you create spaces where people immediately feel seen and included?
I have to say, your viewers have the best questions today. Like I'm really having to think about that. So, so thank you for these. I think creating spaces where, people feel seen and included. One of the things is, especially when it's a mixed group of people, is having some kind of icebreakers to kind of get everyone on the same kind of like the same playing field. I have been guests at some events and it's like, okay, it's a networking thing and everyone's just supposed to randomly, start walking around a circle and talking to people. Those things don't usually work out well because it's like you might see someone and then you start talking to them and you're not going to go make friends with other people. So whenever I have a mixed group together, I always kind of ask them a few icebreaker questions. And then it gets them thinking something a little bit deeper than like, okay, why I'm here. So they're sharing. One of my favorite questions lately is, what is one of the favorite foods you've eaten away from home, something like that, right? So then they start to share stories of, oh, I was in this country, or I was at my friend's house, or all of these different things. And so then everyone is already starting to, talk about themselves. And we already, kind of mentioned that the best way to get people to open up is for them to start talking about themselves and sharing their own stories. And then with that, you've got all these different people that are already connected on the same topic. So it might be different foods, it might be different, regions or, locations, but they've already kind of, shared some type of, common sentiment and things. And then also just the space that I host my guests in, I try to make sure it's cozy and comfortable and, everyone's sitting around a table and kind of rotating seats and stuff like that, just to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to, kind of move around and feel comfortable.
We have a question here that just came in, and it's, how did your journey from Hollywood to Prague reshape your identity? And identity is part of your IRE. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So I guess I will dive into why I actually moved from Los Angeles, my whole journey out of LA. So I was in LA I was over 10 years. And during that time, I was celebrity chef cooking for all these big stars. I was on all these different TV shows. I even had a billboard. And my brand at the time, like my actual brand, was Pink Hair Chef. So that was my identity. People saw me and they knew me as Pink Hair Chef. And then it's kind of a long, crazy story, but I went to this really famous hairstylist because he was like, I'm going to do something new and fabulous with your hair. We're going to make it like a lighter, like rose gold pink. It's going to be even better than this pink. And he ended up melting off my hair to the point that I had to shave my head. So I had built this whole entire brand around this Pink Hair Chef, and my hair was gone. And so I was really just, it wasn't just my hair. It was like who I was. It was my company. It was my trademark. It was all those different things. So, a couple things kind of happened around that. And I was just like, no, this is not going to work. This is not going to work anymore. This is, if I kind of try to hold on to, this whole pink hair thing, it just wasn't going to work. So I was like, you know what? I think in LA, the LA chapter, I did everything that I had set out to do. And I just want to mention that even when we have the best jobs in the world, when we're, doing everything that we want to do and we're having fun and making money, sometimes it still gets repetitive. Yeah. It's like, okay, like I'm hanging out at all these celebrities, $30 million mansions every day, cooking meals. Like, after time, it's like, okay, what's next? So while losing my hair was very devastating, it also forced me to do something entirely different. And so after that whole experience, I was like, okay, my background was actually, I had gone to school, did my master's in marketing, was working on a PhD in corporate finance at the time. And I was like, let me just rebrand my LinkedIn and start instant applying to just whatever jobs were outside of the US. I was like, I'm ready for something different. And sure enough, I ended up getting a job in Vietnam. And so I relocated there. I was working in corporate finance. And so, I went from Pink Hair Chef, red carpets, doing the whole celebrity thing to like, okay, I had like slick back, like tiny little black hair and little suits and working in that corporate environment. And, and I realized the personality that I had with the pink hair would not work in that corporate environment. So I had to change the things about myself that make me me. Like I could not be fun and, lively and stuff like that. I had to be very like straight and narrow and things like that. So during that time of moving from, Hollywood to Vietnam, not only did I have to, totally change my appearance, change the way, I acted. I'm also learning a whole new, social norms and environments and those things at the same time. So I like to think that the way I survived it was pretending I was just an actress and this is like a movie and this is the new role that I had to play.
But I think, Mariko, I think that, pivoting and changing and reinventing ourselves, because we lose the passion, right? You're in it every day, the repetition, it's like, okay, I can cook for this person. I can cook for this person for the rest of my life, but then it's going to get boring. I'm going to lose my passion and purpose behind it. Let me go and travel. Let me see where else I can go with this. And I really want all my listeners out there, reinventing is an amazing thing. Starting over is an amazing thing. I know a lot of people get overwhelmed with starting over, but you just never know where it's going to take you or the avenue it's going to take you, right? And it's
Yeah.
taken you on an amazing journey, from the pink hair chef to where you are today, where you're having these
Yeah.
moments. We do have a question here. Generating over 13.5 million in partnerships is an incredible achievement. What values have helped guide your work and collaborations? Let's talk about that work and collaborations.
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So, a lot of the partnerships, deals that I did it had to do with when I was working on the marketing side or the culinary brand, like culinary side, working with different, brands, brand activations. And that all happened because of relationships, so I think, part of it is just being a person that I don't want to say that I know everyone. I'm actually pretty bad at like maintaining a lot of my, professional contacts. That's one of the things that I'm trying to, to work on. But, just, that happened from really just trying to, yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's a couple things. For some of the big brand deals that I did, some of it was actually just cold reaching out to different companies and brands and stuff like that. So just sending them messages on LinkedIn or emails or Instagram DMs saying like, hey, I have this project that's happening. I'm really, passionate about it. I think your company would be a good fit. Can we have a conversation? And most people are willing to have a conversation because it doesn't cost them anything. And you never make it about you make it about the company. Like, hey, I see that your food brand has a social responsibility component. I am doing this music festival for this vegan artist who's looking for vegan food sponsors. It's a way to get your product to more people. And then that's interesting to them, right? Because it's more about them. So I think, a lot of the partnerships I did was just just cold outreach. And then some of it was my relationships. But I think, with it all is you can't be afraid to ask. And even when people say no is a response. And a lot of the no's that I have gotten, they're like, hey, no, not at this time. It's not in the budget at this time. I'm not interested, but I have another colleague that could be interested, right? So I think that's, that kind of worked for me in my Los Angeles days, and it's been years later, but that's what I'm doing right now too. So, I'm just kind of putting myself out to strangers on the internet and,
But that's the way to do it, right? Is just put yourself out there. Because if you don't put yourself out there, no one's going to come and reach out to you. Nobody's going to know you. Nobody's going to understand what you're doing. We have a question that just came in, and it's why do you believe the most important conversations happen around a table?
I think the most important conversations happen around the table because that's where they've been happening since the beginning of time. If you think about, going back into just like, histories and ancient cultures, that's where a lot of like the communication happened. People were out gathering food, cooking, doing all of that stuff. And there was one meal a day that they could finally sit around and share stories. So I think, part of that. And then it's when we're eating, it's like our brain is relaxed, our body's relaxed, we're nourishing ourselves. So there's so many different psychological components that are happening around meals rather than just like the act of, eating. And I think, and I have been in, environments with like billionaires, doing dinners with them. And then I have also been in a hut in Sri Lanka eating on the ground, like rice with my fingers, doing that whole thing. And I think the one thing is it doesn't matter who you are, where in the world you are, what you're eating, that meal together is what makes everyone the same. at that moment. They don't care. They don't care who you are, or what you're wearing, or any of that kind of stuff. They're just, everyone's the same at that time.
I like it, because when we're at the table, that's where the comfort is.
Mm-hmm.
Like the safety net, right? It's kind of like a safety net that you can share anything, and you're not going to be judged, and you're not going to be attacked for it. You're just sharing. We have some questions here. Favorite city for inspiration?
Favorite city for inspiration? For me, I'd have to say Bangkok.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
One ingredient that represents comfort for you.
Sorry, say that again.
One ingredient that represents comfort for you.
Parmesan cheese.
Really?
Yeah, I eat like blocks of it. Serious. I just like love eating like chunks of like Parmesan cheese. It makes me feel like I'm a kid again.
One word that describes the perfect table for you.
Family style.
Oh.
When like all the table, like when there's no like plated dishes, there's just like everyone can just kind of help themselves and serve. Yeah.
I love when it's family style because there's more comfort, right? And then people are talking as they're getting their food as well. Yeah. Oh, did you grab that salad? Oh, did you grab that? Did you see that was there? So when you're doing your experience, your table experiences and your private events or your corporate events, are you doing that? Are you having like a layout in your for people to test and talk about the different flavors, or are you creating a dish like 7-course meals or?
So I have two different experiences. When I do corporate events, that's an entirely different thing. So I won't get into that. But when I do, so my two most popular experiences is one is a farmer's market tour. So we go through the Prague, like the oldest farmer's market. People pick out different ingredients, and I have them say, like, your mission is to find an ingredient that you have never seen before or you've never had before. And so everyone's picking out all these different things. And then on the spot, when we get back to my house, we're having to create something that they've, like, we don't really know what we're having. We're just like, okay, we have this whole table of all these different fruits, vegetables, ham, sashimis. It depends, right? And then everyone kind of, helps. And then we sit down and have the communal dinner. So the communal brunch. So that's like family style, and and everyone kind of knows about the ingredients because we were talking to the farmers and all that stuff during the tour. And then for the sit down dinner, it's usually I kind of tell stories with each dish. And sometimes they're sitting at the kitchen, at the dining table, or sometimes they're at my kitchen counter. So it depends. Most of the time, people want to actually sit at the counter and chat while I'm cooking and taste things along the way and see what I'm doing.
So, Mariko, if you had a final message for all the listeners today about food and about what you do, what would it be?
It was something that I was going to say earlier, but the conversation moved past it. But it would be choose your heart. So maybe it's a little out of context to what you asked now, but it was something I was kind of thinking about how, it was like difficult to like, move countries, do all these different things, right? But I think it's a lot harder being in the, doing the same thing, being stuck in the same mind space, when it comes to food, like not being afraid to try different things. If you try something different and you don't like it, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're not going to eat it again.
Yeah.
It's not like it's not like it's ruined your life. And, so I think that's kind of like the takeaway is just, just be open to trying something that's a little bit different. So trying the new foods, taking that trip, even if it's a solo trip by yourself, going to the grocery store on the other side of town that you would never normally go to, finding a stranger to have a meal with or a coffee with. So, I think that is the one thing in my life that has, that's like my biggest takeaway, like all those moments that I've had that have really made life worth living are just the ones that I was willing to, try something different. And I hope that everyone else can do the same and have some of the same effects that I have had.
And Mariko, if you could just spell out your website for all the audio listeners, and if you have any upcoming events or anything that you'd like us to know about, share that, and then I'll do a wrap up of today's tea time.
Okay, so you can go to my website, marikopresents.com, MARIKO presents.com. And I always have events going on if you're traveling to Prague. I also have some different online digital books. I was trained in Ayurveda when I lived in India. So I became a licensed Ayurvedic practitioner. So I have some different digital books on, being able to create a lot of like plant-based foods that are, customized to your lifestyle and your preferences. Some of my celebrity recipes, I have all of those on my website. And if you're just interested in food or cooking or have any questions, all of my socials are on there. And Miss Liz, you've been great about sharing everything. So, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to ask questions. If you're like, hey, Mariko, what's one of your favorite recipes for this? I will share that with you. So, but yeah, so that's the, you can find me there and just, stop by, say hi.
Well, I want to thank you, Mariko, for joining me all the way from Prague today and sharing your experience and your story with us and the listeners out there. Thank you to the listeners who joined us and asked questions. You guys, I couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you again. This is my team. Tea and me, we make tea and we make a team. So thank you guys for joining. I just want to thank all of you guys for continuing to support Miss Liz and the journey as well. A little bit of today's tea time. What a rich and inspiring conversation today. Mariko, thank you for bringing your wisdom, global perspective, warmth, and intentional approach to the tea time table. Your journey beautifully reflects how experiences, cultures, and human connections shape not only our paths, but the understanding of ourselves. Today's conversation explored identity, reinvention, travel, storytelling, food, and the importance of creating meaningful moments that bring people together with purpose and authenticity. One of the strongest takeaways from today is this: connection grows when curiosity is stronger than judgment. Through your work with Mariko Presents, you continue creating experiences that invite people to slow down, engage deeply, and rediscover the beauty of shared humanity across cultures and communities. You also reminded us that reinvention is not about becoming someone else. It is about allowing ourselves the freedom to evolve into who we were always meant to become. Here's some food for thought to leave with everyone today. What if every meaningful experience, every conversation, every journey, and every shared meal is quietly shaping the person we are becoming? Because growth often happens in the spaces where people connect authentically. Thank you, Mariko, for sharing your story, your perspective, and your passion for building meaningful human connection across the world. Until next time, keep creating intentional experiences, keep bridging culture through storytelling, and keep serving real life tea one conversation at a time. And I'll see everybody at 7 p.m. and we'll do this all over again.